to sit down here?
Um,
Community Improvement Corporation, and they're the county land bank, and they created a joint land trust with the city of Columbus, and they're developing a couple properties in Wyland Park. Laura knows the addresses, but they're former duplexes that have been demolished. And this is the update that we have. The COSIC would like to come in April. They're now working on pre-development plans, and the plans are dependent on the city's schedule for the land trust. COSIC wants to share their policy on how they will be advertising and marketing the much anticipated homes in Wyland Park. This policy has to be vetted internally and through an advisory committee, and they're planning to do that in March. So that's my update. And so the update is really, there's no update. So hopefully in April, we'll have an update. I'm sure they would like to start construction as soon as possible. I mean, I hope. So any questions on that? Anything I can, I can ask a follow-up to Hope or to the land trust if we want to have them come prepared with something in April.
I would love to know if they're still committed to doing single family homes. I think when we first talked to them, they said only single family homes. And then they said, well, maybe doubles. And it would be nice for these homes to be able to be as accessibly priced as possible. And, even to the point of there's a couple of locations, or maybe just the one. I know that some of their lots are paired together, 2 lots together. And we had talked at one point about the notion that perhaps they could build 3 houses like Donna's across 2 lots, so that even if they decided to stick with single family homes, they could make a really efficient use of that space. And maybe they aren't able to be creative with their plans, but I'd like to keep asking them, because I'm afraid we're going to end up with homes that are very large and very expensive, even when they're discounted.
yeah.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think that's perfect. And I'm glad you brought that up. So I can say, somebody asked a question, so I'll definitely email that to her. And I mean, I personally completely agree. So I hope they are exploring multifamily options.
I mean, if you look at the NRP homes, those are single family homes. And, if you were to value those with, property values today, none of those residents would be able to afford them. So if they build these single family homes, if anything, the land trust is just going to have to sell them more at a discount, which I don't know, like if it's a massive discount. I think in some of the other areas that they've built, they're probably not having to discount them as much in the South area or in Franklinton. So if they did multiple units, it'd probably be more cost effective for them as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Great. Now I can pass that on to them, and we'll let them know that's something we would ask them about in April, and they can hopefully come prepared with a response. Any other questions on that? Okay, so the next item was the zoning code update. I'm sure everybody's taken the survey. They extended the survey time if you haven't. Okay, any questions on that? I have no other information about the zoning code update other than I'm sure it will take many years.
Yeah.
So what does AMI mean? This was kind of part of a conversation we had, I think last month, talking about AMI in regard to the East 7th Avenue project. So I did a little bit of Googling today, and I'm still confused, but I feel like I know a little more. So here's my little brief on AMI. It's calculated annually, so it changes every year, and it's basically going up every year. Right now, Columbus, or the Columbus region is, I think down here, is 84,500, which means that half of households in the Columbus region earn $84,500. Below 84,500, and half earn above that for a household income. So that would be 100% AMI. If you're earning that, you're right at the median. So basically all the housing subsidies are based off of this calculation. And I'm not exactly sure how it translates into the rent price, but I think it's 30% of this then would be your annual housing cost. And then I think you divide the 30% by 12 to get a monthly rent. That's what I think. So basically it's not localized at all. It doesn't take into consideration the zip code or the census block, if it's high poverty or very wealthy or anything like that. It's a regional measurement, and it's updated annually. So it changes by the family size too. And I really don't know what the increments are and what the calculation for this is. But then this is how you can see the current City of Columbus regulations are leading to rents of this per month for these different unit sizes. And again, I also don't know the increments, how they're calculating the price change between the bedrooms. So I'm personally interested in it, so I probably should do more research into it.
I know generally, like when you mentioned the Columbus metropolitan area, that would be beyond Franklin County.
Yeah.
So I would imagine it'd be, all the touching counties plus maybe a few others.
Yeah, I actually am not 100% sure, because there's different, there's combined statistical area, there's transportation area, there's
Well, they,
metropolitan statistical area. Go ahead, Michael.
I think they reference here Columbus Metropolitan Statistical Area, which would be the 10 counties. But keep in mind, that doesn't really change Franklin County that much, because incomes in Franklin County are pretty much on par with the suburban counties. Delaware County is very wealthy and high income, but Franklin, incomes are much higher in Franklin than in Pickaway or Licking or Madison counties. So just because it's not only Franklin County, I wouldn't be too concerned that the numbers for AMI got pulled up because of the suburban counties. I think the challenge here is a lot of developers will talk with specificity, and they will say, oh, 100% of our units are affordable to people at 100% of the area median income. And then people hear that and they think they heard the word affordable, as in somehow these are going to be easy for people to get access to. And that's not true. Like, the developer is accurate, but what I think people hear is something much better from a social justice standpoint than what reality is.
Right. I mean, when they have said, oh, the studio is a reduced, amount, it's like, what was that figure there? Studio they were saying was, almost $1,200. That's not an affordable studio. And in fact, for, some residents that have moved into Wineland Park prior to the property values sort of exploding, it's possible that some people, their mortgage for their whole entire home might be less than this affordable studio for $1,200.
I just think we should be clear, and we, this has happened just before, that yes, all of these units might fit the 100% AMI that HUD establishes. That does not mean these are affordable in the sense that they are lower priced than what the full market will bear.
Yeah, below market is different than affordability measures. I also wanted to point out that the program requires the hey Elizabeth, the program requires the occupant to have a certain income, which is good, right? Because you could have a program that actually required the units to be rented at a certain amount, period, and that it maybe wouldn't require the tenant to have a certain income. So to have the income restriction is a really good thing. So an example of rent control, for example, in New York and San Francisco, some of the tenants don't actually have to have a certain income because the rent control is attached to a unit and it remains with the unit. So this program is good in that it does have a income requirement for the occupant.
But I think it's also just intuitively clear that, especially in neighborhoods that are gentrifying, that these kind of limits are not significant. Like what the city is calling very proudly affordable housing set-asides is not effective.
Actually, I'm pretty sure the city knows that its hands are tied in regard to being forced to use this regional figure, which is not indicative of the incomes in these neighborhoods. I mean, I think they have to go use this figure when even though they know it's not realistic.
Because that's the federal guideline that everything related to affordable housing is gauged by.
Yeah, because the other thing to think about is if you didn't have these larger snapshots, I mean, think about even Wallach, which is, an affordable builder. It would be different in different parts of the city. What the city is now versus 10 years, like as an entire zip code can see significant increase or decrease in its economic vulnerability. Like as just an odd example, I was working with someone this afternoon about with Lutheran Social Services, doesn't matter, but I was polling all the census tracts at Interstate 270 at 70, including census tracts outside the Beltway, where in the year 2000, 14% of the census tract was economically vulnerable, and by 2016, it was 57%. That's a huge shift in 16 years, but this was the whole Bryce Road, Hamilton Road corridor, and it's like, you look at the rate of economic vulnerability that's out there, it far eclipses what Wineland Park is today for the 43201 zip code. And developers and builders can't be doing one thing 5 miles away from another site in the same part of the city when all those kind of regulations and things. So HUD establishes it, and they do these metropolitan boundaries, and it's not reflective of market conditions at the neighborhood level, but it's what the government requires.
Yeah, and I think the article at Columbus Underground also said there's only been like a few hundred units produced with this new tax abatement scheme that the city put in 3 years ago, which is sad. And I think it makes you realize that, it's just a drop in the bucket. And personally, I think we should expand the portfolio of publicly owned and nonprofit owned housing, like what John Edgar's doing on the South Side is a nonprofit's owning the housing and controlling the rent. And the only way to offer units at scale is to be a landlord and to own properties to prevent them from falling into the market. So I don't really think this is working well.
Especially considering that CMHA is doing exactly the opposite of that.
I know, it's really scary. The article today, I think in the Dispatch, saying that they expanded their voucher program by 1,000, which is great, but they're also selling off all of their physical assets, which Cleveland and Cincinnati aren't doing. So we basically won't have any physical housing developments managed by CMHA. And I don't imagine them building more in the future. So they're pretty much all gone and have been privatized, some to the nonprofit sector, which is, not horrible, but it's a kind of a grim picture.
I really wish, because it puts neighborhoods in such a bad position, like we're talking with developers, the developers feel like they're doing what they're told to do, and the neighborhoods are just like, this is total bullshit. It does nothing for us. It does nothing for current residents at all. It's utterly inadequate. And so you can't start from a position of like, we can get to somewhere useful because there's too much of a gap. I would really love to see, to find out about opportunities for us as a neighborhood to advocate for changes to this. I mean, I know the city council can just barely make advances in their attitude toward policing, but affordable housing needs to take a giant leap forward too.
Well, speaking of council, there's a legislative package on the docket right now called the Housing for All package, and there's 3 components. The first is renter's receipt, which is pretty simple. You just get a receipt for the rent that you paid, and it's required that the landlord give you one. The second is a security deposit requirement or flexibility, which would require landlords to allow you at least 3 months to pay your security deposit, and or allow you to basically take out an insurance policy in lieu of having a lump sum security deposit. And then the third component is the Section 8 requirement that landlords accept Section 8, which is a really big step. It's called source of income discrimination. So that'll probably pass. So that's good.
Matt, as we're sitting here, an email came in that I just got authorization. I will be testifying, representing United Way and our membership of funded nonprofits to testify in support of that ordinance for Monday night.
Wow, awesome. Okay, yeah, if you have I think I want to look more into this stuff about how it's calculated. So if you have specific questions, you can put in the chat or email me. I think I'll probably email somebody at the housing division and just try to learn more about it.
I really appreciate you doing this. I think the more you can drill it down to something as simple as possible to be able to share when we review new projects, so that the developers can see what we're talking about, our neighbors can see what the facts are, because no one has time when we're reviewing those things to try and like bring the 2 sides into the same realm of reality.
Yeah, I think overall I was just wanted to make sure that I understood the area median income is calculated by the region and not any smaller geography than that. And that's an unfortunate limitation of using that metric. So hopefully, I think that the current income of the neighborhood should be taken into account when requiring affordability in these projects. I think that's highly relevant. So hopefully we can advocate for some way to change that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we got here late. I apologize. The time just goes so fast in these days because we have so much on our plate, so many places to go. I missed this. Are developers are the percentage of affordable housing? I understand that affordable housing is determined by bigger scale. Are the percentages dictated by HUD as well, or can we say, okay, well, yes, we understand that that's where this is what you're using, but you're saying 70%, and we're like, how about 30? Or is that not possible?
I'm pretty sure for the tax abatement program that the city determined the requirements. For other programs, like if you can see my cursor, it's HOME. It's an acronym, which I don't know what it stands for, but that's a federal program that they're getting from CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. The city can't change those requirements, but I'm pretty sure for the local tax abatement program, they can change the AMI percentage that they are forcing developers to do in return for a tax abatement.
But a developer can't, on a per project basis, change the financial structure because that's set in the legislation from the city related to the property tax abatement, right? I mean,
but I think they can change the balance of the units to reach a certain percentage. Like a bad example, like if you had to have an average of 80%, you could do maybe like a few 40%, a few 120%, but the average has to meet in the mid. I think that's one possibility.
mhm.
Like finding a combination of lower and higher ones that gets you to the middle. But the problem is developers, from a market perspective, they don't really see very low income people as being a compatible population to live with basically 200% of AMI, which would be upper middle class. So they're not really building projects where that's going to happen. They'd rather stay safe and be in the middle.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we can definitely push city council and our leaders to be more aggressive on this.
I would love to help, like, anytime there's a chance for us to testify as a neighborhood, I would be glad to help draft something, that we could vote on together and sign, just to weigh in.
Awesome. Yeah, if something comes up.
I agree, because some of the developers, they come, real proud. Oh, look what we're doing. And we're like, yeah, but you're going to be making a lot of money. This is still not affordable. And all you're doing is causing displacement to happen more and more.
I mean, that's
Doing
complicated.
the right thing, but I'm like, but you're not actually helping any of our neighbors.
No, right. You're
You're
just,
letting some, I'm sure, perfectly lovely, less middle class people move into our neighborhood, and well, they are welcome to our neighborhood. I'm more concerned about the people who are already here. Just so.
when I had moved into this neighborhood, one of our residents, I think he lived over on 7th, and I can't recall who asked me for help, but I was helping him move to the far east side, and I felt bad, like, here I'm moving in and this guy can't even live in this neighborhood anymore, and I'm helping him move out, because he,
Yes, they're complicated issues. I mean, the challenge is, I want to just share with folks that when you look at the entire city, there are 10 times more neighborhoods that are getting poorer than neighborhoods getting wealthier. All of the conversation and all of the literature is about the 4% of Columbus that actually has recorded gentrification, but 4% of Columbus is experiencing gentrification. 43% of the city of Columbus is getting poorer, and the other 53% are having no real change up or down. If they were already poor, they're about as poor. And if they were wealthy like Clintonville, they're still wealthy. I do want to point out, though, that I just looked up the reference, and this it tells you the studio rent or the 1-bedroom rent at 100%. That also is including gas, electric, and water. So
I knew that.
it's a formula that they say that someone at 100% that's in a 2-bedroom apartment, they cannot pay more than in a 2-bedroom or the 1-bedroom, $1,580 a month. That would be your rent, your electric bill, your gas bill, and your water bill combined.
okay.
So HUD does that as a housing cost burden ratio. So it's a little, it's not as high of a rent as maybe we thought initially. It's
Right.
still high.
Okay, great. So can we move on from this one?
Yep.
Okay, always a perennial topic, so we'll never really not discuss that, I'm sure. I'm going to now move on to 8th and Indianola. So I was just a nosy neighbor and just found this guy and emailed him and asked him to share his plans. They did not have to come to any commission that I know of. I'm pretty certain that they didn't apply for any variances, which means everything they proposed met the existing building and zoning requirements. So the product you see here is exactly what the current city zoning and building and zoning code basically wants and allows. So if you don't like what you see, then that is something that needs to change in the zoning code or the building code. But basically, this is what the city is saying is acceptable and doesn't require any input from neighbors at all. So again, this required no variances to my knowledge, and it was approved between the developer and the department. And now it's under construction very quickly. So these are the images. This is located at 8th and Indianola where the old church burned down. And it's a 3 condo unit project and looks to be 1 garage entry with 3 interior 2-car garages and rooftop patios, I believe, over. Oh, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think rooftop patios. Anyway, this is it.
Yeah, they're all 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, open concept main floor with rooftop decks. I'm sure they'll be $500,000.
And this is CPO. That's conjecture, by the way. This is CPO housing, and the CPO housing is across the street, and it's also to the east. So it's locked in by CPO housing.
And had no access from the alley whatsoever.
I'm pretty sure that property has no alley access to the property.
Correct.
Absolutely.
And that is underground parking, right?
Or
No, it's not underground. It's
the
just
first floor.
Semi?
first floor, yeah.
What about trash? Just, I feel like I'm the trash lady, but
It's 3 units.
I see
It would be-
no,
I would, Matt, if you go
Trash.
to there, I would imagine they will keep their 90 I would imagine they will each have a 90-gallon dumpster that they will have inside their garage and they'll wheel it out to the street on trash day.
that's what I would imagine.
So you said it was only 3 units, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
So I think if it's more than 4 units, then you have to seek your own trash
yeah.
provider. And if you're under 4 or under, then you're provided through Columbus.
thank you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But eventually those big green bins, like throughout the city, they're trying to eliminate those neighborhood by neighborhood. By the time it gets to our neighborhood, I'm sure it'll probably be a few years from now, but in some parts they've started swapping out those big, I don't know how many gallons it is. It's like hundreds.
300 for the big ones, the big.
300,
circles are
yeah.
300, and then the personal ones are 90.
Yeah. So they're switching from the 300 to the 90 over a period of time.
So this is it. If you don't like it, we should tell the city something. You know, there's no design review. There's no input on something like this. I'm not horrified by it personally, but it could have been better.
Doesn't it have to go through the university area review board for like?
I don't think this is in the impact district boundary.
Euclid's in the impact district.
Yeah, it's
right
jagged.
outside. It's right outside the impact district.
Oh, Indianola is the
It's a very jagged boundary. It doesn't really follow one street.
okay. It could be worse. I agree with you, Matt. It could have been better, but it
It could be a lot worse.
could. This is me. I'm saying it's not terrible.
I think
mean-
the first thing that UIDRB would have told them though is the setbacks. The way that building just puts its shoulders in front of all the buildings on both sides is unfortunate.
I like that. That's a good analogy. Let me out. I'm gonna get all the attention. Let me out of here.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That was a nice way of putting it, Laura.
Okay, so that was that. What was the next thing on my agenda? It was just parking. So I don't know. I think the city wants to just hear from different neighborhoods that might have parking problems or anticipate parking problems before we come running to them, you know, in a panic about, well, I can't park anywhere. You need to do something now. They're reaching out now and saying, you know, just kind of putting a feeler out there. They want to be responsive and listening to us. So if we do have issues that we want to bring to them, I would encourage us to do that over the next, 4 or 5 months about parking.
Have they told us anything lately about when the university area parking permit scheme is supposed to actually roll out?
I think they're kind of wrestling with the recent results that they got. I think they were like a lot different than the first survey, and so they can't really mesh them. So they're kind of conflicted. So there's not really a timeline for that, but they're still seeking input. So if we have input, we need to tell them in the next couple months.
Okay.
I know they redrew the boundaries quite a bit because in the first initial mock-up they had, like I would have been included in the permit zone, and then they've tailored it back a bit. So I guess I'm no longer part of, it doesn't come as east to North 4th Street.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's true. So, I mean, just given the fact that there's 500 units online for development in the neighborhood, I think they want to know if we have a something like a group voice about this from the civic. Like if we have an opinion, a consensus about this from the civic, then we should communicate it. If we don't have a consensus and we all have different opinions, it's probably not something we should really talk to them formally about as a civic. if that made any sense.
It's weird. I always feel like with these really complicated city plans, you get to a point where they just have to start doing it, you know,
Yeah.
and then you can respond to that because it turns into such a mishmash of them trying to make everybody happy and like
Yeah.
split the difference in 50 different directions. And
Yeah, I support more of a pilot plan approach. Try it. If it doesn't work, change it. It's not a big deal. You don't have to commit to it for 5 years.
I mean, at least in the case of the short north parking, they have made adjustments. Like I remember when they were putting that together, they said, oh, we'll adjust it. We're like, bullshit. The city never adjusts plans. They just sit there for 20 years until like we make another one, but they have in the short north. So I'm kind of hopeful that we can adjust.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing, the adjustments they have made pretty much don't require new signage, which is
Right.
both cool and problematic.
It's more of a technology,
Keep in mind. Like,
more of a technology based.
Yeah, we'll do adjustments as long as we don't have to replace signs which need to last 5 to 20 years. Which is entirely valid. But it's important to sort of keep that in the back of your mind, I think.
Yeah.
Like if you're talking about pilots, it's going to be a 5-year pilot because signage is expensive.
But I mean, we are fortunate that with technology, it's not like they're installing meters, which
Yeah.
is very expensive. They're doing it, very differently.
Yep.
And I apologize, we were late. Have you heard anything from the developers who want to build the very tall building on 7th?
We invited them and they said they didn't want to come. So they're going to come in April, I believe.
Okay,
I think they're taking some time to reevaluate and hopefully,
this is just information for the committee. I went and did like a little, bipedal research. They have a curb cut, but they're talking about tearing down 2 buildings and rebuilding, and they have a curb cut for one of those buildings.
Mhm.
Curb cut is designed to accommodate 15 parking spaces, like coming in and out of King 7th Avenue.
That's terrible.
I don't
Pardon?
understand. I don't understand the measurement. 15.
There are two apartment buildings. Only one of them has a curb cut
Oh, okay.
onto 7th.
Yeah, the one further to the west.
Yes.
Yes.
And that only has 15 spaces
In the parking lot.
in the parking lot.
Okay.
Curb cut was designed to accommodate 15 parkers coming in and out.
I don't understand because I don't think a curb cut is designed for a certain number.
No,
But I
that's
think
not.
great thing
That is what it is currently. posted.
about like whether the city is eventually going to say you can't run all your traffic in and out of 7th Avenue, or you don't have an alley that's big enough to run 200 units worth of cars in and out of,
Yeah.
and that's going
Yeah,
to be the size of the building somehow.
Well, and I think they're talking about like 75 parking spaces. So the point would be, it would be in Elizabeth's point, 4 times potentially the volume of cars coming in and out across that sidewalk, which is the issue. And the look of the building with a curb cut in that location would be pretty treacherous.
Or even like
Well,
the entrance for Kroger, is pretty unfortunate too. I mean, you come in and out of 7th and they probably should just close it off and people can come and go in and out of High Street like it is now, but then maybe move more people off the, what's the side, the
Portland.
Cortland, and make that like no parking on the street or something. It doesn't really function as a 2-way. I mean, they allow you to park on one side and it's sort of a gamble when you go down to that street, whether someone's coming or not. It's sort of like those old Clintonville roads where they're 2-way, but they're really only, the space for one-way traffic.
Yep.
I just wanted to bring that up because I worry about the sidewalks and kids crossing the street, and I've almost seen a little kid die crossing High Street without the light at Euclid because parents sometimes think it's safer to send kids down Euclid because it's a quieter street, but then there's not really a great crosswalk. So, and particularly when they're trying to get to the library. And I know they're going to say you should have them walk down Euclid, then walk, south on High Street, take the crosswalk and walk back north to the building they can see from Euclid, but everybody knows nobody's gonna do that.
No, it's, the seriousness of traffic violence is not lost on me. I'm
And I'm just really worried about what that Seventh King is going to happen, because the King and High building is going to add pressure to that intersection
mhm.
that already is under pressure. And this building, well, maybe they're gonna come back with like a very nice 3-level 60-unit plan, which would be like tripling what they have now. So it's good for density, but it won't be overwhelming.
No,
We'll see. We'll see. We don't need to talk about it more, but they are requiring a traffic study, and they're gonna have the detailed traffic study. So I hope that they'll have that in April so we can review it, because they do very serious traffic studies in the Department of Public Service. So
Denison Place actually found that the traffic study for the King and High was not very, that the residents didn't think their concerns were particularly well listened to.
I think it's a very scientific and technical process to do this type
Okay.
of traffic study. I don't necessarily know how much public input goes into that. I think it's more of a template that they're doing with data and stuff,
Oh, like area median income.
I guess.
Area median traffic.
Laura, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I've also heard from Pastor Roby that the developer has been in touch with the church once and maybe twice and is ongoing. And so there's a connection. I won't even say hope, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Better than being ignored,
yeah.
but not perfect. So, okay. Any suggested topics for next month?
Oh, parking and traffic. No.
Yeah, hopefully we'll talk about the 7th Avenue project, and I'll do a little bit more research into the AMI stuff.
That was really helpful, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Have you heard anything back from Marker about their idea about somehow kicking some money into affordable housing somewhere in the neighborhood out of their project?
God, I don't even remember that.
Yeah, remember they were saying like if they couldn't, for that project on Fifth,
Yeah.
Pine Goblin Guild, they were saying they could potentially bring some of the units even more affordable, but the money somehow would not necessarily be able to come into their project. It would have to go somewhere else in the city and maybe somewhere in the neighborhood. And then we didn't really hear from them again.
Laura, didn't they say something about the Port Authority and somehow
Yeah,
there'd be funding with them?
yeah.
The Port Authority?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Port Authority. Yeah.
The Port Authority has some role in affordable housing funding streams. It makes,
Right, makes no sense.
yeah, what Port Authority, we're in Columbus, but yeah.
Well, I don't know that I could really piece together an email with that request in it.
I would just ask them if they've had any more progress in the Port Authority
Okay,
direction.
Yeah, that's,
got it.
yeah. That should be good enough for them to recall.
Grant Dolvin.
Yes.
Okay, I will do that.
If there's nothing else on the agenda, and if we could just take a couple minutes. Nobody else has anything else to bring up. I promise it'll be short.
Oh, yeah, sure. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Michael and I and two other neighbors on Euclid and another neighbor in Wineland Park, we're starting to try to work on building carriage houses in sort of as additional dwelling units on our properties. And we're still in the early planning stages, but I just sort of wanted to give you guys the heads up that that's what we're thinking about. There are 3 families on Euclid, on the north side of Euclid, that are pretty interested. And a couple more families who are like interested, but not right now. So I just wanted to give people the heads up. You know, we've got abnormally deep lots.
Mhm.
Lots are like 100 and
Sure, 130.
130 feet deep. So you could actually put a pretty big additional dwelling unit facing the alley and still have like a bigger backyard than the stuff over in the new Wagenbrenner properties. So does anybody have any, before we spend a whole lot more money and time on this, does anybody on the committee absolutely hate this?
I think most people have generally been favorable of them.
That's sort of what we thought. We're not trying to do anything weird or radical. And honestly, we're planning on building it so our beloved child, who we love very much, who loves us very much, can live there. And so we can all love each other very much with a little more distance.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not a huge fan of Airbnbs, but they're not as offensive to me when they're a carriage house on another person's house. I think that's fine. Like if you were to turn your entire house into an Airbnb and the carriage house, then I would be really mad. But I think a carriage house is awesome. It's a great way to have income. It's a great way to add density. So I totally support it.
We're not asking for support. I'm just asking if people are super angry and don't want us to like move forward. I wanted to know that before we.
Go for it.
Great, we finally paid off our student loans. Let's just go build another building.
Seems about right.
Awesome. Well, good luck with that project. That sounds like a big undertaking.
If it happens,
So-
we'll talk to you.
A lot.
I'm here. So thanks, everybody. Email me if you have any questions or follow-up items. And I just emailed Grant, so I'll let you know what we hear back from him.
Cool.
Thank
you, Matt.
everybody.
Ciao.
All right, see
Oh,
ya.
sorry we were late.